Today on the newscast, will incoming Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu strike Iran's nuclear facilities? Plus, what about Israel and Russia and Bibi's relationship with Vladimir Putin? Get all the breaking details next. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. We want to get right into it today with our very special guest, Israel's former ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer. Now, Ambassador Dermer served as Israel's top diplomat in Washington, D.C. for 7.5 years under then and now incoming Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In fact, Ambassador Dermer has previously served as Bibi's top advisor, very close to the incoming Prime Minister. Two topics in particular we want to touch on with Ambassador Dermer, and I sat down with him, by the way, recently in Jerusalem. Number one, Bibi's approach to Iran, and in particular the Iran nuclear program. Now, last week, a Knesset member from Bibi's Likud party, Zaki Hanegbi, a guy I've also interviewed several times in the past, he said, look, if number one, the Iran nuclear deal just collapses, it doesn't happen, and number two, if the U.S. does not act, I believe, said Hanegbi, that Netanyahu will strike Iran's nuclear facilities. So I talked about that with Ambassador Dermer. He's obviously very close to Bibi. Hanegbi, who made those remarks, has worked with Bibi for years as a member of Likud. Now, the second topic we'll break down with Ambassador Dermer is the Israel-Russia relationship. We've documented here in the newscast how that Israel-Russia relationship has been unraveling over the past several months. In his last go-round as Prime Minister, Bibi made several stops in Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin. So Ambassador broke down the dynamic there for us as well. Hey, this aired, the entire interview, on this week's episode of the Watchman TV show on TBN. If you like the newscast here on YouTube, you will love our weekly 30-minute Watchman TV program on TBN, where we're in Israel and points beyond throughout the Middle East every week, bringing you on-the-ground perspective from the world's most strategic, volatile, and pivotal region. Without further ado, here's my interview with Ambassador Ron Dermer. The Biden administration still seems to be fixated on forging a new Iran nuclear deal. Ambassador, you sounded the alarm on this. On the first incarnation of this deal, why it was so disastrous, why would it be such a mistake, certainly at this point in history, to come to a new agreement with the mullahs in Tehran?
Well, what the administration says now, what they said 2015, is everything Iran is doing will be much worse if they have nuclear weapons. I agree with that. You know what the problem is? The deal that they want to do with them doesn't block them from getting nuclear weapons. It actually paves a path for Iran to get nuclear weapons because it puts certain restrictions on Iran's nuclear program for a short number of years. Now, in 2015, those restrictions were 5 years and 7 years and 8 years and 10 years and 15 years, meaning in 2030, started in 2015, there's no restrictions on Iran's nuclear program. So you're going to make a deal, you're going to give a kosher stamp, and you're going to allow Iran to slowly but surely move ahead and create a nuclear arsenal. And at the same time, you're going to release hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to fuel Iran's war machine in the region. Now, if there would be a deal on the table, Eric, that would actually block Iran's path to getting nuclear weapons, I would support it, even if it would call for removing sanctions. But this deal doesn't do it. It was a tragedy when it was done in 2015. Today, it's a farce. It has become an absolute farce. And what's interesting to me is that the dissidents in Iran are telling the United States and the European powers to not do this deal. That was something they didn't say 7 years ago, because now they understand that if this deal is done, all it will do will give more money to the Iranian regime to repress them. And that's why they're calling to end it. So they should listen. United States, Britain, France, and Germany should be listening to the people of Iran and abandon the negotiating table. Call them the evil, it's not an empire, but call them the evil regime that they are. They're working, as you know, and you've written about, Iran is in Iraq, they're in Syria, they're in Lebanon, they're in Gaza.
Head of the snake.
They're in Venezuela, in your backyard. They are trying to export terrorism through their proxies like Hezbollah or the Houthis, and they have a terror network all around the world. This is the foremost sponsor of terrorism in the world. You have the people of Iran that aren't burning the American flags. They're burning pictures and tearing down pictures of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They're burning the pictures of the Ayatollah. And instead of getting support from the outside world is ignoring them. This is a moment where we can peacefully resolve the nuclear problem of Iran. Because, look, we do nothing and Iran gets nuclear weapons. It is a catastrophe. If we stop it, we're going to have to launch an action in order to prevent that. Now, that will come with a heavy price. We might have to pay that price because the danger of a nuclear Iran that calls and works for Israel's destruction is so great that we may have to do it. But there is one way where we can really peacefully resolve this, which is if the Iranian regime collapses from within. And that moment is there right now. The spark has been lit. The fire is spreading throughout Iran. Now, what they need is oxygen. They need the outside world, the free world, to support the Iranian people's desire to be free, to pump as much oxygen as possible into that. And we could have a situation like we had 30 years ago with the collapse of the Soviet Union, a game-changing event that would help the Middle East in so many different ways and help us also advance peace in the region.
Yeah, and the sponsorship for terror that you're laying out, that wasn't mentioned in the Iran nuclear deal. Iran's ballistic missile program also not mentioned in the Iran deal. Iran's massive drone program being used obviously to great effect here in the region, now being used in Ukraine by Russian forces. Ambassador, tell us about this Iran-Russia relationship, how that's growing and how it could mean trouble not only for Ukraine but for the West and for this region.
The Iranian nuclear deal that was done in 2015 had several sunset clauses, meaning these restrictions on Iran would end after a certain number of years. They'd be automatically removed. The first sunset clause was the arms embargo. The UN Security Council had an arms embargo on Iran. That ended in 2020. That is what enables Russia to get arms from Iran. And Russia has always been careful at not violating UN Security Council resolutions. There are sanctions against Russia right now. There are American sanctions, there are European sanctions, but there's not Security Council sanctions against Russia. You know why? Because they have a veto in the Security Council and they can stop it. So because they have the veto, they've been always careful not to violate those Security Council resolutions, or else they're undermining one of the real powers that Russia has. The arms embargo is gone. Now Iran is giving hundreds of drones, suicide drones, to the Russian army to use to kill Ukrainians.
Are you concerned about tensions between Russia and Israel starting to rise? Of course, there's been this deconfliction mechanism in Syria, where Russia has not stood in Israel's way as it's done what it's had to do against Iran trying to entrench itself in Syria. Are you concerned that may be going by the wayside and there's an increase in tensions right now between Israel and Putin's regime?
Israel essentially shares a border with Russia, not geographically, but the Russians are in Syria. They came into Syria when the United States essentially abandoned Syria. So the United States left, Russia and Iran came in. Over the last 10 years or so, Iran has tried to use Syria as a base to attack Israel. They are trying to create in Syria what they created in Lebanon. There's two countries to the north of Israel, Lebanon and Syria. In Lebanon, through their terror proxy Hezbollah, they have created a terror base where right now Hezbollah has about 150,000 rockets pointing at Israel, and they have fought wars against Israel from there, perpetrated acts of terrorism. They are trying to create another base in Syria, Iran-sponsored terror base, to be used against Israel. Now, what Israel has done for the last 10 years is we have bombed hundreds of times Iranian positions in Syria to not enable them to establish that beachhead against us. Now, Russia's there. Russian military's there. Russian planes are there. So, thus far, for the last decade or so, we have been able to act against Iran with almost complete freedom of operation.
And to great effect.
And to great effect. And Russia has not changed its policy to try to close the skies to us, to try to shoot down Israeli planes. So this is a real fundamental security issue. We don't want to be in a situation that not only are we fighting Iran in Syria, we're fighting Russia in Syria. So the Prime Minister had to act very nimbly, and he used to go to Putin a couple times a year, and he would tell him, look, I know what you're trying to achieve in Syria. here's what I'm trying to achieve. I want to put it on the table. I'm not going to allow Iran to establish a military base to be used against us there. I'm not going to allow Iran to push through Syria's sophisticated weapons to Hezbollah. We're going to continue to attack them. So we were both basically acting to advance our interests.
Thanks again to Ambassador Ron Dermer for those great insights. Folks, if you want to watch my entire interview with Ambassador Dermer, just go to tbn.org, type in the Watchman in the search bar, and you can pull it up, episode 240 of The Watchman Show. And we will also have another clip from my interview with the ambassador posted right here on the Watchman YouTube channel tomorrow, Saturday, November 12th. So be on the lookout for that. Ambassador Dermer breaks down what we can expect from the new Israeli government. Again, this was the top advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu for years. The two remain very close. And of course, Ambassador Dermer was Israel's top diplomat in the U.S. for nearly 8 years. So he knows what he is talking about when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu and what we can expect from this new government going forward. By the way, if you want to get the exclusive first look at every new episode of the Watchman TV show before it even hits the air, you can become a Watchman Premium member right here on our YouTube channel for just $4.99 a month. Number one, you help to keep the channel going and help to support our work here. But number two, one of the perks you get is the exclusive first look at every brand new episode of The Watchman Show before anyone else in the world. And before it even hits the air, our premium YouTube members get a chance to see the show first. So check that out. You can just go to join on our homepage here on the channel to look in to premium membership. And by the way, if you're not a premium member, nothing changes. We still love you. We just passed 500,000 subscribers here on the channel. So we are very, very thankful to God Almighty and to all of our watchmen and women on the wall. Hey, thanks so much for joining us here today on the newscast. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.